Okay, so today we're talking about the flower power of tropicals in the landscape, specifically mandevillas and hibiscus, and how to keep them looking great all season long for constant color. Okay, so these that are behind me are specifically mandevilla vines. If you're not sure what they are, customers are always coming in and saying, I want something for my landscape that's going to flower nonstop. Maybe I can bring it in over the winter time to keep it going. And really my favorite by far is the mandevilla vines or tropical hibiscus. Now, let's look at the specifics on the benefits of both. If you're looking for something that's going to climb, then you're going to want the mandevilla. But there's a few different kinds, and you want to make sure you're asking or grabbing the right kinds. Let's look a little closer. Okay, so these are classic mandevillas, and I can't even say that they're true classics. They're actually newer generations of the classic, but their growth habit is more of a vine. You can see right here, these right here, they're going to climb up this trellis. If you have any kind of arbor, any kind of trellis, or even an obelisk, something that goes in a pot that they can climb on, these do awesome. They're going to just flower nonstop. Now they're always putting out new growth, and these will actually grow and climb onto a trellis and just keep growing up. I put these on trellises, and I'll have pink flowers. I like the pink one, the classic, all season long. If you're those who are used to mandevillas, many of them use what they call the large leaf or Alice DuPont. That was a classic pink version of mandevilla. It was one of the ones that grew the most aggressive. The problem, it was a insect magnet, so lots of people had problems. These newer ones have waxier leaves, but they still climb and they still flower aggressively. So when you stand back, when these are up onto a vine, those flowers are just going to keep going all the way until you get a solid frost. But this version is the climbing version. When you're reaching for mandevillas in general, you want to make sure whether it says mandevilla or diplodenia. Diplodenias by nature are a stockier plant. This is something I would put inside a flower vase or an urn, something, because it's going to be kind of leggy, but it doesn't need staking. It's just going to keep growing out like you see here, and it's just going to keep cascading out, and it's going to weep down. But if you keep the fertilizer on it, it's going to flower for you all season long until frost. Now, in this category of mandevillas, it comes in multiple colors. And so we have diplodenias in multiple colors for containers. Then we have the vines. But then we have these beautiful pink ones for hanging baskets. Now, the key with these is most people don't realize they're not just going to naturally weep. It's still just a vine, and it's still going to try to climb, which is why it can look really cool in a hanging basket. And you'll get these pink flowers all season long. However, you do need to pay attention to them. What I find is that they're going to try to keep climbing. They don't know that the poles that they're hanging from aren't stakes. So they're just going to keep trying to climb up. And if that's a desirable look to you, great. But if not, just break them apart and then pull them manually so that they cascade down off the sides. That then is going to make this just weep all season long and not really get into anything and be a headache. But it just looks really cool as this gets bigger and bigger, and it just weeps and cascades down. Now, the mandevillas in general are amazing plants, especially if I want something that's going to vine flower power. But lots of people like the tropical hibiscus. That's these guys right over my shoulder. And it definitely has a little bit more of a southern feel. If you're down in Florida, you see these used in landscapes all the time. Let's take a closer look at them because they're definitely one of the more popular and more commonplace tropical plants. Now, these are hibiscus. They've got a classic flower. I'm sure you've seen these before if you've worked in the landscapes of putting planters in pots and up here north. Down south, these are shrubs in the landscape. I'm very jealous of them because they're not a massive flower all at once, but it's just going to keep kicking out these flowers all summer long. And as this bushes out, and you can see on some of these, as they darken up and the foliage starts spreading out, it's just a cool tropical feel. But these come in 3 different categories. So when you're asking for them, you want to make sure you know which ones you're getting. Again, these little tree forms like this is called the standard. So when somebody calls and asks for hibiscus, that's the standard version. Just means almost like a lollipop, like a small tree. It's been pruned to get rid of all the branches. These are all genetically the same plants. They've just been trained to grow this way. So Now you have the traditional bush form. Again, this is something more I would be putting in planters that I wanted to maybe do a combo or standalone. It really doesn't need even a combination. Again, these just came in, so as they stretch out a little bit more and kind of from being packed up, they're just gonna darken up in the foliage. They're just gonna keep kicking out these flowers all season long. At most, I find that these here, they'll fall off after a couple days. If I wanna keep them cleaner, I'll pick them off. But so you've got a bush type, you've got the standard, and then we've got these cool braided versions. And so these are actually 3 different plants all wound together with a pink, a yellow, and then the red flowers on there. So it's a really cool little accent piece. You put that in a nice vase on a pot. That's what you're gonna get all season long. It's just gonna keep picking out those flowers, and you can see at any one time they're typically covered in a ton of blooms because no one flower lasts that long, but you always have a succession going out. And by and large, these are pretty low maintenance in the landscape. Now, whether you're growing tropical hibiscus or any other houseplant, houseplants, any other patio pots or any planters, the key is going to be keeping them well fed. Now, these hibiscus always come in these same size pots with an extremely well-drained soil. And so that I find out they dry out a lot. I take them, I repot them. Don't go crazy big on the pots. The rule of thumb is if I'm taking a plant out of a 10-inch pot, I'm only going up about 2 inches in size. So I take a slightly bigger pot, I mix it with a good rich potting soil, and then I repot all these plants, and they're gonna last a lot longer in between watering. So that's just a little trick I found to keep them going. Also, whether it's the Mandevilla vines or the hibiscus, they're pretty good feeders. I like using a liquid weed. You can use organics. I like the liquid Miracle Grow. I don't need anything fancy like the Mare Acids or the Bloom Boosters. I just use the all-purpose in a liquid control gun that I attach to the end of my garden hose, and then I just water my plants once a week, every other week, depending on how fast they're growing. And so that's really all it takes, in my opinion, to keep these guys happy. Let them dry out in between watering, but not to the point where they wilt. And then saturate. When you have to water pots, water them extremely well so that water's coming out the bottom. And if it was bone dry, water it twice, water it 3 times. You can never overwater at any one time. You can just keep them too wet constantly. So if you let them dry out well in between watering and then water to saturation and then feed them every week to 2 weeks, you're gonna be happy and they're gonna thank you and they're gonna give you these colors all summer long. Hope that helps. Take care.